come to hand. Today has mostly been about youth crime, and so it should be. The impacts it's been having on all of us here in the southeast and across Queensland. People are sick and tired of having their cars stolen, their homes broken into, assaulted, threatened, held up, robbed, left terrified in the night. We just had a caller, Lee, from Logan Lee, who just called in 5 minutes ago and spoke of a terrifying experience last Sunday at 5 o'clock when two youngsters, broke into his home with a machete, armed with a machete and a knife. When they spotted him, they bolted. Enough's enough. Hundreds took to the streets outside State Parliament today, maybe even 1,000, for the Voice for Victims March. Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk didn't even show face to meet the people hurt most by this out-of-control scourge on our society. Now, at the same time, fresh youth justice figures have been released by the government overnight that reveal the problem isn't getting any better. That's the thing here. We keep trying these weird and wacky ways of dealing with this, but it just keeps getting worse. The rate of young people aged 10 to 17 who are in contact with youth justice per 10,000 population, it's as high as 65, and it's gone from 415 to 419 for Indigenous kids. Now, on top of that, we've been told that since March this year, 402 unique young offenders have been charged with a total of 1,681 breach of bail offences. So 402 and 1,681 breach of bail offences. 28 serious repeat offender declarations. 681 charges have been laid for the unauthorised use of a motor vehicle under circumstances of aggravation. So those are violent car thefts. And another 49 young criminals have been charged with taking to social media to boast about their crimes. Now, Terry Goldsworthy is a former Gold Coast police detective. He's a criminologist at Bond University. He joins me now. Now, Terry, you've seen these new stats. What did you make of them?
Look, I think they're concerning, Peter. I mean, these are the criteria that the government put out to say that it was going to judge success by, and on three of the big ones like reoffending rates, the amount of Indigenous children in detention, and the amount of serious repeat offenders, they're not meeting their goals at all. In fact, it's going the opposite way, which is concerning. And I think that probably reflects that a lot of their responses that we've seen in the last 2 years are totally ineffectual. And we've been saying that for some time now, that the evidence is showing, and this government is big on evidence. It has very slick advertising kind of brochures on the Youth Justice website, talks about program evaluations. Well, clearly they're not working because those stats show that they're not. So, Terry, the government, and this is a question, it's an obvious question, but it's a serious question, and I need to get to the bottom of it. The government repeatedly tells us that Queensland now has the toughest youth justice laws in the country, but these numbers tell a different story. Can you explain to 4BC listeners why they keep saying that, and yet the evidence we see in the community, particularly with these stats and with anecdotal evidence, suggests otherwise? Yeah, look, I just think it's the government sticking to messaging, claiming that they've got those tough laws. I mean, if you look at the decriminalisation of drugs, hardcore drugs that they did 2 or 3 months ago, the minister accused me of lying for saying they decriminalised it. Now, any definition of decriminalisation captures what the government's done. So they play at semantics. They talk about increasing the maximum sentence for stealing a vehicle. I've said many times that's just irrelevant because no youth offender ever gets the maximum sentence. So they can probably claim we have tough laws, but are they actually going to make any difference in terms of impacting the criminal justice issues that we have? Probably not. We saw today the announcement from the police minister about a dedicated task force. My questions around that is, why has it taken 2 to 3 years of the youth crime crisis to put a dedicated task force into this? When you look at bikies, for instance, we had one incident on the Gold Coast, and within weeks we had up to 150 police assigned to task forces to deal with them. There were twice as many bikies as there are serious repeat offenders in the state. So the problem is less in terms of the offenders they've got to deal with. Yet we never saw that response until this week. We've been told there's now a task force, but we haven't been told how many people are in the task force, what is their purpose, what are their goals, and how long will they be available as a task force. Terry, you would have seen today's Voice for Victims March, estimates of between sort of 800 and 1,000 there, which is a pretty good result on a work day. What does that sort of suggest to you? Obviously people are fed up with crime, and if it had been a Saturday morning, you'd probably expect there could be 10 times that amount. But is this a sort of a watershed moment when it comes to citizens, good, honest, hard-working citizens saying, you know what, enough's enough?
I think it is. And, I read through the 22 questions that the groups put forward for the government to answer, and I think many of them were quite considered and quite reasonable questions to look at. For example, the electronic monitoring devices, they want to know how many of those have gone out. I mean, last figures I saw, we had 3 out there for a cost of $12 million. Well, what has happened since those figures came out earlier this year? I mean, there's kind of documents we want to see. I note that they... one of the questions was that they wanted the data to be made public and transparent. And I seen a Courier mail today that the data was released quietly onto a government webpage this week or yesterday. That is not being transparent. Transparent is when, like the Minister today for the police announced a task force, you come out and announce this data is available for everyone to scrutinise. You just don't put it up on a web and quietly hope no one sees it. It's just not transparent. I had a look at the Youth Justice website. It's been redone in the recent month or so, and it's got a really slick Youth Justice brochure there that you can read all about what the government's doing in that. And tellingly, a victim appears once in that 2-page brochure. And even more tellingly, there's some data that doesn't seem to be right, or it's been massaged in some way to differ from the data that we're seeing in public. Things like the reoffending rate has risen to 69%, yet in this brochure they talk about a 6% decrease in reoffending. So the data the government's putting out isn't matching the data we're seeing in the newspapers that people are getting access to, and et cetera. And 77% of youth who attended restorative justice conferencing didn't reoffend or decrease, yet the Courier Mail published figures a month or so ago showing that the reoffending rate for youth who attended conferences was in excess of 50%. Mm-hmm. So, there's some lack of clarity around the figures that are being put out by the government, I think.
All right, Terry, always appreciate you coming on to 4BC Drive. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Peter.
That's Professor Terry Goldsworthy, of course. He's a criminologist at Bond University. It's news time, 29 to 5. Jess Ambler, what's making news?
Afternoon, Peter. Victims of crime have made their voices heard during a rally through the streets of Brisbane. The group marching to Parliament House this morning demanding immediate action from the state government. A 48-year-old man has been charged accused of murdering a 69-year-old Tomislav Nemes, whose body was found in a decomposed state on the Gold Coast earlier this year. Around 30% of students have failed to meet new harder NAPLAN standards. The literacy and numeracy tests have been overhauled to better identify which students need the most help. And Olympic champion Stephen Bradbury has been recognised for his heroics, which saved the lives of 4 teenagers on the Sunshine Coast. In sport, Australia's Michelle Janicki has qualified for the women's 100-metre hurdles semi-finals at the Athletics World Championships. And Peter, I'll have more news at 5.
4BC Traffic, thanks to the LDV Deliver 9 van.
At Rockley, there's a 2-vehicle crash at the intersection of Fairfield Road, Sherwood Road and Muriel Avenue. Delays building on all approaches. At Brendale, a 2-vehicle crash as well for Leonard Crescent at Cremzo Road. In Coopers Plains, a 2-vehicle crash to clear from Troughton Road at Musgrave Road. Traffic remains heavy in both directions. Delays on Gregory Terrace both ways through Spring Hill and the Pacific Motorway outbound from the Captain Cook Bridge to Green Slopes. It's Reese with traffic every 10 minutes on 4BC.
Get the LDV Deliver 9 van from $43,990 drive away for ABN holders. Visit a dealer today. T's and C's apply. LDV. Bring it on.
Ray Hadley.
Robbie Catter.